So please mute your cell phones. And the second item would be, if you do need to take leave of the forum, please go out the entrance that you came in and not the side doors. And the third thing is, if you need a bathroom or restroom, go out the back doors here and make 3 left turns, and you'll find your campus restrooms. Now, I want to take this opportunity also to thank tonight's candidates and their campaign staff. I'd like to also thank the Long Beach City College, including Joanna Smith, Cheryl Williams, Dario De Santiago, and Diana Galarza. Also, the Long Beach City College Vice President Chip West and Long Beach City College trustee Ginny Baxter for helping to make this event possible. Our moderators for this evening are Janine Ball, our Lakewood Village Neighborhood Association Vice President and Chair-elect, or President-elect, and David C., our Lakewood Village Neighborhood Association Chair of Government Relations. Please welcome our panelists, our candidates, Rex Richardson and Suzie Price, as well as Janine Ball and David C., please. Give them a round of applause. Our last function of the night is, who do I turn this microphone over to?
Thank you. Our tonight's format is probably going to be similar to other campaign forums that you've seen, but I just want to make sure that everybody understands what we'll be doing. Each candidate will have a 2-minute introduction, which they can use as they choose. They're going to have 2 minutes per question. The candidates will rotate the order of their starting, and the rebuttals, they have an additional 1 minute to rebut or 1 minute to add to their own response. It's their choice. They have 10 rebuttals. We did that because we felt that it made it more conversational and they could get more in depth as the candidates chose. They're going to have a 3-minute closing statement. A rebuttal card cannot be used on the opening or closing statement. They're going to see a yellow card for a 30-second warning. If Michelle could hold that up so everybody can see what that's going to look like. And they're going to have a red card when time is up. So Michelle's our timekeeper tonight. Thank you for doing that for Michelle. And that's it for this evening. So with that, we're going to go ahead and start. And I will ask the first question. Correct, Dave? I've got number 1. And candidates, you do have water in front of you. So, oh, I'm sorry. Opening statement, I'm sorry. So yes. Rex, would you like to start for opening statement?
Absolutely, happy to. Well, good evening, folks. I'm Long Beach Vice Mayor Rex Richardson. I want to thank the Lakewood Village Neighborhood Association and Janine and David for participating in this. We had a great time meeting with you all on your back porch and learning a little bit more about your neighborhood. I'm here with my wife, Dr. Nina Richardson, and our 2 daughters who go to school not far from here. We pass this campus every day, taking them to school. I'm proud to have served on our Long Beach City Council for 8 years. Started off back in 2014. In the past 8 years, I've been a leader on some of Long Beach's biggest challenges, and I'm proud to serve as our city's vice mayor. I'm not originally from Long Beach. I grew up in a working community and working family. My father was in the Air Force. I was born on Scott Air Force Base in Belleville, Illinois. My mother was a welder in Wentzville, Missouri on the assembly line, Rosie the Riveter, if you will. She was originally from Alabama. When my mother and father divorced, we moved around a lot, and we ultimately settled down in Alabama for a few years in a very small town where my 2nd grade teacher was my mom's 1st grade teacher, and my 5th grade teacher was my aunt. When I was 11 years old, we moved to California in a Greyhound bus. It was my single mom. It was my sister, who's a year older than me, and my younger brother. We had a 2-bedroom apartment. My mom had 1 bedroom. My sister and my brother had a bedroom, and I slept on the couch, and we were a working family. So I worked at Jack in the Box when I turned 15 and a half, and my sister worked at the stationery shop, and my mom worked at Arby's, but we all committed to going to school, getting an education, and making a difference in our lives. I'm proud of the work that we've done on the Long Beach City Council. In North Long Beach, we stood up for things like building the first library in the district and restoring our paramedic services that had been cut, and we had 3-minute slower response times. As mayor, I'm going to fight to make sure that every community has what they need to thrive. I have a proven track record of delivering results in North Long Beach and across the city, having built the city's first municipal homeless shelter And I look forward to this conversation and working together with all of you. Thanks so much.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Suzie Price. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you to our hosts for allowing us to have the opportunity to speak with you tonight. I was born in the United States, but my mother and I came back to this country from her country of birth when I was 7 years old. I learned how to speak English at the age of 7, and my mother taught me how to thrive in a new country. My mother was a school nurse and taught me the importance of public service. She retired after 42 years as a school nurse with the LA Unified School District, and her foundation led me to become a public servant, having a career of 24 years in service, not politics. I fell in love with the city of Long Beach when I moved here at the age of 18. I worked my way through Long Beach State, getting my bachelor's degree, my master's in public administration, and serving as student body president. I had the opportunity to learn so much about this beautiful city, serving at the time when Mayor O'Neill was our mayor, learning how to incorporate student activities with the city of Long Beach, and being with President Maxson as we dug the first shovels into the ground for the pyramid. I owe a debt of gratitude to Long Beach State because that is really when my life began. I went on to law school, and as a result of an experience I had in an internship in law school, I've dedicated 24 years of my life to serving crime victims through some of the most dangerous and traumatic situations of their lives as a criminal prosecutor. I ran for office by way of the PTA 8 years ago. I'm a very grassroots candidate. We wanted a crosswalk. 43 crosswalks and a flashing beacon later, I've learned that our city has a lot of challenges ahead of us, although we have a lot of great opportunities. We've accomplished many great things in the area of environment and business allocation, business resources, and so much in terms of housing and working on our major problems together. But we have a financial deficit of $25 million coming up and a homeless problem that's 62% increase. We need a mayor with her eyes on Long Beach, a mayor that cares about this city, a mayor who doesn't want us to be LA, and I'm that mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. The first question will go to Suzie, and it is, the Queen Mary will cost hundreds of millions of dollars to become fully functional. Where do you stand on the future of the Queen Mary?
Sure. So I was the only council member who voted against giving $23 million to Urban Commons. And that's because it makes no sense when you're entering a partnership with someone and there's a $250 million liability that they're supposed to pay for, that they ask you to give them $23 million up front. That's just common sense. I'm proud of that decision. But having said that, we now have an asset that is really a liability. The true cost of the Queen Mary right now to restore is about $500 million. I am not in favor of spending tax dollars to restore the Queen Mary unless we go to a vote of the people. I will tell you that I think the Queen Mary is currently being evaluated by the port as a potential asset. The port does not want the Queen Mary, but what the port may want is the land behind the Queen Mary called Pier H. If the port can monetize Pier H in a way that it makes sense for the port to take the Queen Mary, then it might be a situation that works out. I will be open to any and all possibilities, but in my opinion, the Queen Mary needs to come out of the water so that it doesn't continue to deteriorate in the salt. And the Pier H needs to be monetized by something like an expanded cruise terminal. We need to increase our cruise passenger fees from the $2.50 we charge now to somewhere around $7 to $8. And if we do that, we might be in a position to generate enough revenue to help restore the Queen Mary in whole or in part as a tourist attraction for people entering and leaving the cruise ship. They can spend the night there on a hotel before they board their cruise the next day, not having to come at 3:30 in the morning, and they can explore the ship, take a tour, and on their way out, just like they do at Disneyland, be directed towards the gift shop where they can purchase things about the Queen Mary, the city of Long Beach, or where they just went on their cruise. The Queen Mary has the potential to be a tourist attraction and generate revenue, but it certainly cannot generate enough revenue to restore itself. There is no way. And we also have a submarine that we need to figure out what to do with sitting right next to the Queen Mary. So that's another thing our mayor's going to have to deal with, and I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you. I just want to explain that the little purple things are rebuttal cards. I think you both figured that out already. And if you could just hand it to Dave or myself, whoever you're closest to.
Great.
And do you want me to read it again, or are you good?
No, it's fine.
Okay.
Good. Well, I'll tell you, when I was raised in Alabama, we had certain values, and one was you have responsibility to pass things off to the next generation in a better position than it was when you received it. And I think when I think of the Queen Mary, anecdotally, imagine you have, a home that your grandfather built. Maybe he didn't invest in it. Maybe it has termites, and that passes on to the next generation, and they didn't take care of it as well. And then it passes on to you, and all the neighbors show up and say, okay, time to burn down the house. Well, no, you would treat it like an asset. You would do an analysis, evaluation on what makes the most business sense about that asset. You want to, at the very least, get a return on your investment. That's where we are with the Queen Mary. It's an asset, and there are significant liabilities in that asset. We need to first acknowledge that getting rid of the Queen Mary could cost between $150 and $250 million. And that's a cost that we would have to pay. Or we monetize the Queen Mary, extend it by taking it out of saltwater and find economic life to it. There are a lot of suggestions in terms of development that could happen and utilize it for cruise ship terminals and things like that. But by taking it out of the water, you can extend its lifetime by 75 years. You monetize that 75 years to create the revenue source that can help offset the costs that are needed to restore the ship. And so my commitment is that, number one, we have to protect our city's revenues, our city's services. Our general fund is in trouble, and we can't allow the Queen Mary to continue to become a liability on our general fund, so it impacts the services that we all care about: police officers, firefighters, libraries, after-school programs. And so in order to do so, we have to have a strategy that protects it, extends its life. And if we find out that that's not feasible, then we have the discussion about alternatives to that. Thank you.
We've got a 1-minute rebuttal from Ms. Price.
So the one difference between the Queen Mary and your grandfather's clock is that we have for decades now allowed operators to come in and loot the Queen Mary. They have taken everything out of the Queen Mary that's of any value. So this is not your grandfather's clock that is in your house and you just don't take care of it. We have mismanaged and failed to oversee the Queen Mary, and we have some liability for that as a city, and that's a fact. I love that I'm hearing Councilman Richardson talk about taking out of the water. I've been saying that since day one, and I recently heard him start saying it as well. That's absolutely the case. It has to come out of the water. But if the cost of restoration is $500 million and the cost of alternate disposition is $100 million, that's still a $400 million difference. And that's still a reality that we have. So we can't say $100 million difference is something that we can't afford. Therefore, it's not an option, because neither is $500 million. So we have to be open-minded. We have to think about what we can do, and we have to explore all options.
So I get a response to the rebut. No, I don't have to give one. She used hers.
No, you have to give one every time you respond. Yeah, either one of you respond for an
Sure.
additional minute.
All right, good.
Sorry.
Thanks. So we've both served on Long Beach City Council for 8 years, and we all know the story. And people don't need excuses or to rile people up behind the story. What they need is solutions. The other thing that they need is to be able to unify people behind a vision. Councilwoman Price will tell you that she was the only voice, the only one who voted no against this. The mayor can't afford to be the only one to say something without bringing your colleagues along. If we're all going down and you're the one protesting, you haven't demonstrated leadership, that you can count to 5 votes and get additional people who work with you for 8 years to go along with you. As mayor, we're going to unify a vision and be able to deliver the actual votes to make sure that we can deliver on what our vision is for the Queen Mary. Thank you.
One more.
Okay, next question.
Okay, we've got another
Oh,
rebuttal.
one more rebuttal.
You can keep
Thank
going
you.
back and forth on the same question.
We can if you want.
I'm not rebutting anymore. Go ahead, Councilwoman.
Oh, do I have your permission?
You don't need my
Thanks.
permission. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. We need a mayor with an independent voice who, when they see something that's happening that's bad policy, is not going to feel like they have to go along with the group think. And you know what? we got taken advantage of as a city by Urban Commons. They took tens of millions of dollars of our money that we cannot account for. And absolutely, there are times when you have to say what needs to be said, even if that means you don't go along with the rest of the group. Because you know what? A lot of times there are people in a group and they sit around a room and they say and do things that are absolutely wrong in the name of governance and power. And you need to stand up and say if something is not right. And I am so proud I did that. And I will do that as mayor.
Next question. How would you promote public safety when policing is under significant scrutiny? And Councilmember Richardson goes first.
Sure. So I represent a district that's had a history of crime, property crimes, lack of investment. And my residents, when they want the very same things most of the people in this room want. Number one, they want to have a healthy and well-resourced, police department, fire department that's going to respond to them when they have an emergency. What they also want is to have a safer community where they don't have as many emergencies, where they don't have to call the police as much, where they can go to their park and feel safe. And that's why I believe that we have to, one, make sure that we invest in things like recruitment and retention in our police department. We are short on staff today. We do the very same things in our fire department as well and make sure that we have those resources. But on the other hand, what does it take to build a truly safe community? I believe you have to invest in communities that are not safe. That's why as a council member, I prioritize things like building banks and libraries, investing in the Houghton Park Community Center. So spaces people didn't feel comfortable walking through. Now it has murals and new facilities, investing in youth. We've partnered on things like education and working with our school district to have after school programs and second chances for our youth. Because together, if you invest in your youth, you invest in public safety, you create a sense of safety. There are partners that have not been engaged that we need to engage. For example, when my predecessor was on the city council, we needed a business district. And so we knocked on doors to those businesses and the city said, it'll take you 10 years to get it done. But we worked on it and we got it done in 2. And so we have an uptown business district with security, with Conservation Corps helping pick up trash and sweep up the sidewalks. That street level work is what builds healthy and safe communities. And we need to do it in every one of our neighborhoods. Thank you.
So the way we address public safety with the police being under scrutiny, which I believe was the question, is one, we continue to add more police officers to our police force because we're currently down 250 officers and 103 of those positions are vacant and budgeted. So I'm not even talking about adding more to the budget yet. I'm just talking about filling the vacancies that we have, which is 103. And if we fill those vacancies alone, our response times will improve. Of course, we have to acknowledge that for a city of our size and demographic, and if you read any policy papers, you'll know it's our size and demographic combined, police response times and police presence are the #1 deterrent of crime. But not every community trusts the police in the same way. Some do trust the police and others, for good reason, don't. There are very few professions where if you make a mistake, it can impact someone's life and the life of that community for eternity. And policing is one of those. Law enforcement is one of those. Prosecution is one of those. And so we need to make sure that we're establishing a culture of trust, which is why I'm very proud that as chair of the Public Safety Committee, I championed the body-worn camera program that now every patrol officer in the city of Long Beach has a body-worn camera. We were told for years that it was too expensive, that it was going to cost millions of dollars to oversee the program. I kept saying it will not cost that much. And I was correct because what I do in my day job led me to believe what the request would be and how much the cost would be. And that was exactly what happened with our costs. We need to invest in more police officers. We need to invest in programs like body-worn cameras and additional training, but there is no substitute for having adequate police staffing. And if you want to look at all the things, I congratulate Councilman Richardson for everything he's done, but he represents a district that has a very high crime rate, one of the highest in the city year after year, despite those investments. And his residents, the ones that have talked to me, want more police presence on the streets. That's important to them.
Yeah. So I want to talk about that great community that's had issues with crime. We have to get the story right. Crime didn't just pop up in North Central and West Long Beach overnight. It's been like that for generations. And we have to acknowledge that there's been systemic lack of investment in that community. When I took office, my community was the only one without a bank, the only one without a coffee shop, the only one without a library. We didn't even have a paramedic. And I'm looking at Councilwoman Gabelich here because she remembers in 2010, it was the FY 2011 budget they were negotiating. And we ended up, I believe it was two things on the chopping block that day. And this was a deficit budget, very hard years. And what ended up happening was I had just become chief of staff to Councilman Neal. Now I'll use another one if I need to for my time because I need to get this story right. So basically, two things on the chopping block. There was the Long Beach Municipal Band, which was about an $800,000 cut. And it was Paramedic Rescue 12 that served North Long Beach. I was the only paramedic in the 9th district. And it was our second council meeting. I think I was chief of staff and the council chambers were filled. There were more people there than we have here today. And a lot of seniors, people had, big signs and they said, save the municipal band. And so we learned a hard lesson today. The band got cut and the band got saved and the paramedic got cut. But the impact was 3 minutes slower response times. The challenge was nobody was there from North Long Beach. And we had to deal with that for 7 years, 3 minutes slower response times. And so when we talk about the issues of crime and all of these things in their community, we have to acknowledge that this is not short-term work we're talking about here. We're talking about addressing the challenges of generations, changing the way we think about systems, and making long-term investments. Let me use one more. We have to think about this as a garden, right? Imagine you have a garden, and that garden has all the things you want to eat in that garden. But you walk away from that garden and you don't water that garden. And somebody comes up 5 years later and turns on the faucet and expects fruit to come out. No fruit comes out because it's no longer a garden. And they take their faucet and they put it in another garden. And that garden continues to get more and more, water. And then somebody comes up and says, this is not a garden, but it is a great place to grow a garden. You have to pull out the weeds. That's the nuisance liquor stores, the nuisance motels, all of those things that have happened in North Central and West Long Beach. You pull them out like I've been working on doing. And then you plant new seeds, libraries, community centers. And if you do that, then you have a garden. Our communities need fundamental change. And to ignore generations of lack of investment to score a political point shows that you don't have the compassion that it takes to serve as mayor of Long Beach. Because you have to understand that we truly have to be a mayor for our entire city. Thank you.
The rebuttal, may I clarify that we only went?
Well,
Hold on one second. Did we just go 1 minute on that? Got 3 rebuttal cards. Thank you. I'm sorry. I didn't see
That's
that.
okay.
I apologize.
Well, I don't even know what to say to that. I mean, as mayor, you have to make sure that you're serving all of the residents of the city. And as mayor, you have to make sure that you're actually carrying out responsibilities and delivering results. And you can talk all day long and use beautiful language, but at the end of the day, the data speaks volumes and you have a duty to your residents to make sure that you're solving problems. And I don't think solving problems means that you don't have compassion. The question that was posed to us tonight is how do you address public safety issues with people scrutinizing the police department? The answer to that question is you continue to invest in police departments because that's what people want in their communities. They want to feel protected and they want the response times to be consistent, and you hold the police accountable. That's the answer. That's not a lack of compassion. That's public service. Residents deserve to feel safe. And, we passed the budget for the Michelle Obama Library in 2014, our first year there. This was not Mr. Richardson's project. We passed the budget then. And despite that investment, crime rates continue to go up.
Next question. Tideland oil funding is diminishing. What are your plans to support the facilities and programs that are currently funded by Tideland revenues? And I believe that Councilman Price starts first.
Sure. So Tidelands revenues are going to be a diminishing source of revenue for the city of Long Beach. So for those who don't know, of our $3.2 billion budget, we have 9 enterprise funds, and 2 of our enterprise funds rely upon oil revenue. And those enterprise funds demand that the money only be spent in specific ways or in specific areas, and Tidelands is one of them. So as oil revenue continues to diminish, the city is going to have to identify additional sources of revenue from which to fund programs and activities and infrastructure along the Tidelands area. So things like the aquarium, the convention center, all the bathrooms and playgrounds along the beach bike path, all infrastructure from the sand to the concrete is going to have to be paid for through another source of revenue, which is probably going to have to be general fund. In order for the general fund to be able to consume all that it has to in terms of debt and liability, the general fund is going to have to be augmented with sales tax and property tax revenues. We're going to have to work together as a city to figure out how to increase our revenues, because the general fund is going to have to take on more responsibility for the city than it has before, because thus far, all of our projects in the Tidelands area are paid through the Tidelands Fund, including our police and lifeguard activities all along the beach. So moving forward, we're going to have to incorporate those liabilities into the general fund and do so without raising taxes, which is a commitment that I've made.
So thank you. So first thing that we have to do is we have to acknowledge that, you know, the Tidelands Fund, it takes care of many of the assets that Councilwoman Price mentioned, and we care about those assets like our aquarium. But we also need to understand that things are changing. The way that we used to budget for Tidelands, you know, we would say it's okay to build an $80 million pool because it was Tidelands, because you had the money for it, because it was Tidelands, and no one else could use that money. And the rest of us that are outside of Tidelands, we would say, hey, maybe we don't get the pool this year. Maybe you get you fix the roof at the Houghton Park Community Center, and we had to make those choices. And so while I support, you know, the fact that we're going to have to find out a realistic transition, we're going to have to be honest about the expectations. We won't be able to maintain all the expectations and build $100 million projects anymore. And that's an honest conversation we're going to have with our residents. But I think we should prepare for it. It's a part of our climate action adaptation plan. We need to think about how we boost revenues and get every part of town contributing to sales tax and property tax, like North and Central and West Long Beach. We also have to have a tougher conversation with the state. The state tax code incentivizes us through sales taxes to build things like car dealerships and shopping malls. Well, that's yesterday. The tax, and while we're running deficits and major cities are running deficits, they had a $90 billion surplus last year. So we need a tax code with the state that prioritizes things like moving away from oil, and, you know, make sure that we build the things we need, like housing that's affordable for Long Beach families. And so by having a more aggressive conversation with the state about the tax code, we can prepare for a more sustainable future. As mayor, you're a part of the Big 10 cities, the big city mayors group, which you deal directly with the governor and the legislature to negotiate these big issues with states. And so as mayor, I'm going to lead this conversation about a broader conversation that prepares us for what a climate resilient city looks like. Thank you.
Okay, next question is regarding the homeless. Homelessness is an increasing problem throughout the city. What are your specific plans to address this issue? And Councilmember Richardson goes first.
Sure. I have a plan called the HOPE Plan, and it's comprehensive. It's based on much of the work that we've done with our Everyone Home Coalition. We have faculty from Cal State Long Beach social work program. We have folks like Brian DeAndrea from Century Village Cabrillo, who have all contributed to this plan. And the fact is, it is a crisis, and it's bigger in scale than what any of us anticipated when we took office. And we have to think comprehensively, both upstream about building capacity to keep people from falling into homelessness, and downstream with outreach and making sure that we have places for people to go. The whole plan is really fundamentally 4 parts. It's on our website. We brought a copy of it outside, but it's housing, building affordable housing, building every level of housing, and shelter and permanent supportive housing. That has to be a part of the mix. Outreach. We need to improve the outreach. We went from 2 reach teams to 3 reach teams. But I'll tell you, as we go out with our reach teams, they'll say, when we finally get someone to come off the street, we've got 3 weeks until they get a bed. And so that works together with housing and outreach. We need localized outreach plans. There's no outreach plan for downtown. There's no outreach plan for the LA River. We've dealt with homelessness issues around the LA River for literally decades. P is for pathways. I'm proud to have been the first person to have bought a home at 25 because I had a pathway to do so. We need pathways for people to buy homes, pathways for them to get jobs. Our pathways to get people off the street, it's confusing, it's complex. And so we need to make the pathway off the street and into housing easier. And then E is for expanding mental health services. I have a proposal that's working through the city council right now to work with our county to expand mental health services in our city. We have a number of great partners that do the work, but they're not accountable to our local continuum of care. We have our own health department, one of 3 in the whole state. Then we need to build a more robust capacity to deal with mental health emergencies, how to identify them, and how to address some of the crises that are happening on our streets today. So I encourage you to go to joinrexrichardson.com/housing to see my HOPE plan. Thank you.
Cities around us and counties around us saw a decline in homelessness. We saw a 62% increase in homelessness. We have 3,300 people who are currently living unhoused in the city of Long Beach. When you look at the population that's chronically homeless, you've got about a third or so of them who are living in unhoused because of a pure financial crisis, eviction, or lost their job. The other 2/3 are a category that are very difficult to reach because of mental health, substance abuse, or a co-occurring disorder. If you step back from a moment and think about homeless outreach in terms of how you would connect with another human being to try to get them to do something that they may think they don't need at that moment, it's through building a relationship based on dignity and respect and meeting people where they're at. The issue right now is an emergency situation in the city of Long Beach. We need to figure out how to connect people with services in the most efficient way. Our outreach teams currently do not work in the evenings and they don't work on the weekends. What we need to do is partner with our nonprofits to expand our outreach teams and our outreach capacity. We need to have an outreach team for each council district, staffed by our nonprofits who specialize in connecting people to services. That relationship is responsible for making sure that people feel heard and understood. And you can't do that by touching someone today and coming back a month later. You have to go every single day. That's what relationship building is for a 2-week period of time. The data suggests, and I know this because I'm involved in the homeless outreach space in my career, my profession, that somewhere around day 8 or 10, when you show up for someone, they're more likely to accept a recommendation that you are giving them and more likely to accept a service. That is the number one way to get people off the streets today and connected to services. And I have made a request to the city manager that we do that immediately around the Billie Jean King Library through the use of our nonprofits, including the Long Beach Rescue Mission. It will make a difference, I promise you.
The city regularly claims to be broke and need new taxes to provide the services that other cities provide without additional tax burdens. Why is Long Beach an outlier, and what will you do to change the ongoing budget deficit?
Do we start with me?
Start with you. Yes.
Okay. So my husband, Mark, and I are fortunate to own a small business. It was always Mark's dream. He grew up first to go to college in his family, and it was his dream to have a business. We know firsthand what it means to have a business and what it means to want to invest in the city of Long Beach. The city is currently doing very little to attract and retain new businesses to the city of Long Beach. We are allocating $0 to that mission. Now, in this past budget, we allocated $300,000 to that effort. But given how long it takes us to actually hire anyone, it's going to be third or fourth quarter of next year before those positions get filled. What I would like to do is have a tax increment proposal where we set our baseline tax revenue at a certain point. Last year, we had $82 million in sales tax revenue. I'd like to set 82 or 83 as our baseline. Anything above that, I'd like to charge 1% of that and give it to business recruitment and retention so that we can attract new businesses to the city of Long Beach. If we can't get more businesses investing in the city of Long Beach, if we can't continue to make sure our property values stay high by creating a beautiful city that people want to live in, where crime rates are low, then we're going to continue to see ourselves falling into more and more into deficit. I have been on the Budget Oversight Committee for over 7 years. I understand our budget really well. I have never overspent my council budget and certainly did not overspend my campaign budget in the mayor's race. I understand what it takes to stay within a budget. I grew up with a single mom. I've been working since I was 14 years old. I will treat your money like it's my money, and I will not be stupid with it and irresponsible. And if that means I have to vote alone or talk alone, well, then I'll do that because you deserve that.
So I believe the question was, how are we planning to move forward given the deficit? Do you want to restate the question just so I'm clear?
Why is Long Beach an outlier? And what will you do to change the ongoing budget deficit?
Right. So I know it's like to represent a community that doesn't have the services that it needs to do with it, what it needs to serve its community. And what I will tell you is we have real challenges ahead in terms of our budget. We've filled our deficit with one-time funds this year. We are going through negotiations with our employee groups who, certainly we're having a hard time keeping employees just like everyone else is, public and private sector. And so we have to think about, number one, how do we continue to deliver services at the end of the day and how we grow our revenues? A few things. One, I'm going to focus on growing our revenues by, number one, creating a Grow Long Beach advisory team who focuses on, number one, getting our own house in order. When it comes to doing business in the city, it should be 3 words people hear: ease, speed, and predictability. You can come here. It's easy to do work here. It's predictable. And we will help see the project through. The second thing that we have to do is make sure that we are growing in every part of town. We're growing economically. So in North Long Beach, we didn't contribute a whole lot to sales tax and property tax, but by making investments in those communities, they become more economically viable. It's important that that happens everywhere. When our downtown closed down during the pandemic, it wasn't that we only shut down services in downtown. We furloughed everywhere, every council district. And so we're interconnected. And so we have to address economic inequality and make sure that we're growing revenue in all part of town. We talked about the tax code. That's got to be something really important that we look at moving forward, like how we incentivize the things we need to do in terms of from a budgeting standpoint. And the last thing I will say is, as it relates to deliver services, we're going to have to innovate and think about how we do things differently. I think there are some services that are done by some that could be done by others. I think we have to think about how we collapse some departments and find some efficiencies because the reality is we're going to be working with less revenue. We have a shortfall today, and with the lack of oil, you're talking about uplands and tightlands going away, we're going to have to tighten our belts. Thanks.
Okay, next question. What will you do to ensure that all Long Beach citizens feel well represented, no matter where they live in all 9 council districts or due to their ethnic background? And Councilmember Richardson goes first.
Sure. So, and I mentioned this in the last debate. I think, we all know that Long Beach is a very diverse city, and that's important. But diversity is really a challenge. It's about how we become a more inclusive city so everyone has a seat at the table and an opportunity to thrive. And our story hasn't really been, we haven't done that. And it's not any individual's fault in this room, but we have a 17-year difference in life expectancy based on social determinants of health and opportunities and poor air in one part of town that has a port and more open space on another side of town. And so I believe that it's not one individual's job, but it's a job as a city, as an agency to represent everyone. And it's the city, the agency's job, the institution's job to make sure that we acknowledge those inequities and we take steps to close them. That's why I was proud to lead the charge on creating the Office of Equity in Long Beach, simply to help our city understand the impacts of the decisions we make as it relates to budgeting, policies that we implement. A great example was during the pandemic, we placed something called an equity lens on every agenda item related to the pandemic response. That helped us understand, one, were we furthering the health inequities in our city or improving it with the decisions we were making? And helped talk about the impacts that COVID had on communities, how vaccinations were lacking in certain communities, and there was cultural context that was needed to be provided. And so we've done that work. Since then, we've grown capacity. The Office of Equity now takes on ADA. It now takes on language access. It's moved into the city manager's office. There's the deputy city manager focused on that, and it's about resiliency. I will tell you right now that a city needs to invest in these things, it's not only smart, but it's economically and fiscally smart to do so as well. So you're not hit with lawsuits and litigation like certain cities are impacting today. And so there's much more I can say about this issue, but as mayor, I'm going to institutionalize equity and make sure that as we make decisions, we do so in a way that looks out for every community. Thank you.
So we have an incredibly diverse city. And I know Councilman Richardson and I both know this because we're all around every part of this town. And I know he's been spending a lot of time in my neighborhood, and I know I've been spending a lot of time in his neighborhood. And I can tell you, regardless of where you live, you deserve to have a city government that's working for you. You deserve to have a voice at City Hall, regardless of your partisan affiliation, regardless of how much money you make, and regardless of where you live in the city of Long Beach. It's important that everyone feel like they have a voice and that their views, their concerns, their priorities are not minimized by anybody, not dismissed by anybody. They should have a voice at City Hall. And so what I'm going to do is on November 9th, an email is going to go out from me to all of the community associations in every council district. Some council districts have 5 and some like mine have 21 community neighborhood associations. An email is going to go out with an invitation to set up a meeting. And they're going to be invited to come to a meeting with their council member if the council person would like to join. And we're going to have a conversation about what do you need to thrive? What are the challenges and opportunities for your community and how can we help you accomplish those? And we're going to set together an operational plan. I know it's not sexy political talk to talk about an operational plan, and there's no acronym associated with it. We're just going to get stuff done. We're going to set short, mid, and long-term goals for every single community, whether they want to have less graffiti in their neighborhood, or whether they want to have less crime, whether they want to have more affordable housing, whether they want to have more green space. We're going to go through every community and we're going to come up with plans, and they're going to hold me accountable to doing everything I can to help their council member with all the resources and tools that I'm able to do in true partnership to help them accomplish those goals. It is really important for us to represent everyone. I came to Long Beach at the age of 18, and it was the first place where I felt I belonged as an immigrant.
Awesome.
We have a rebuttal request.
Sure. And I wouldn't even call it a rebuttal. I think I just want to talk a little bit more about this issue. I've done a great deal of work here. I can think about, representing the district that I represent. We were discussing things like Measure A infrastructure plan, the first one, and we had to make a tough choice. That choice was the Houghton Park Community Center was our only, at one point, our only place to meet. And every winter when it rained, we'd have to move outside because the roof would leak. And during the summer, the HVAC would go out. So we had to decide whether we were going to choose to fix the community center with our Measure A allocation or improve the playgrounds in an area that has 90805 has more children to go to school than any other zip code in the city. And we had to make a hard choice, and we had to choose the community center, and we didn't get any Measure A playgrounds in my district. And it was a hard choice. I think equity is about acknowledging that it's not about everybody getting the same. It's about really understanding those conditions. My children shouldn't have had to go without a playground. And we have to really think about how we get every community what they need to thrive. Thank you.
We have a rebuttal, Michelle.
I absolutely agree with Councilman Richardson that having everyone get the same thing is not equity. Some people need more. They're starting off from a different place. And that concept was brought to light to our city years and years before we started as a council talking about equity. I mean, you look at the work of Dr. Norman, you look at the work of Dr. Hawley, they have laid the roots for this decades before Councilman Richardson and I ever stepped foot on the council, and I'm proud of their work. But what is important to note is that, yes, Councilman Richardson didn't get a playground in his district, but he got an over $10 million community center, an over $10 million library. Every district has to make choices. We didn't get a $10 million library in every district. We didn't get community centers in every district. We do our very best with the money that we have in the city to make sure that every resident gets the benefit of their tax dollars invested back into their community. And some communities get more, and I'm okay with that. But it doesn't mean that just because we don't get everything, we're not being treated fairly.
SB 9 and 10 was recently passed by the state. SB 9 allows 4 units to be built on virtually all single-family residential properties in the state with no public input. SB 10 permits cities to pass an ordinance to allow 4-story, 10-unit apartment complex on all single-family properties. Please state if you support or oppose these bills and why you've taken this position. And Councilwoman Price starts.
I opposed SB 9. I was the first council person to speak out against SB 9. And it's not because I don't think we need more affordable housing and that we need more housing. I believe we do need more housing. In fact, of the 26,000 additional homes that the city of Long Beach has to build in the coming years as pursuant to the state's requirement, 10% of those are going to be in my district. And anyone who knows my district knows that they do not welcome with open arms density and additional housing. And yet together we work to identify places where that additional housing makes sense because every district has to do their share. We can't push it all onto one district or another. But SB 9 punishes the city of Long Beach. There are cities like Cerritos and Huntington Beach who are refusing to add any more housing. They're saying there's no vacancy here. And yet SB 9 treats us exactly the same as those cities. So I wrote a letter to Senator Gonzalez, who I believe is, I know, has endorsed my opponent. And it was published in the Grunion. I sent it to Senator Gonzalez, Senator Umberg, and Patrick O'Donnell, our assemblyman. And I said, can you rethink this? Can we have a threshold for cities like ours who are doing our best to comply with the state housing requirement? And can you allow us to still have local control? Because right now under SB 9, it's a ministerial approval, meaning if the certain elements are met, the city has no discretion whatsoever to deny those permits. So open space and parking requirements, those things are not even considered because it's a ministerial approval. We have zero local control. We never want to be in a place where we don't have local control. No other council member stood up when I stood up to talk about this, and that was in June. In August, my council colleague, Councilman Austin brought an item to oppose officially SB 9 and asked the governor to please not sign it. Councilman Richardson voted against that. It failed. The city council failed to tell the governor, please don't treat us the same as every other city. We need a mayor who's going to advocate for our local control.
Councilman Richardson.
Thank you so much. So we have a housing crisis. There were laws that were prohibited, things like ADUs in our community for years. And guess what? They didn't work. We had very prohibitive laws around legal garage conversions. And I can tell you just about every garage in North Long Beach was converted anyway. There was a law called a Velez law based on 3 little girls who lost their lives by living in an illegally converted garage. And they didn't live there because they chose to. They lived there because that was their economic circumstance. And we had restrictive policies that didn't allow them to convert the garage legally and easily so they can live in a way that was safe and they would have lived. Growth is going to happen. This is about whether or not that growth is going to happen in a way that is safe and not haphazard, where you have multiple families crowded in one household. Half of the residents in our city right now are housing burning, spending more than half of their income on rent. We can't on one side say that we care about the homelessness issue, but on the other side say that we don't support housing or vote against housing production and vote against tenant protections. You can't have it both ways. Either we're going to get serious about housing and economic prosperity of the people in our city, or we're not. And I can tell you, we need to do everything that we can. Now I will tell you, I believe in local control. I voiced my concerns on SB 9 and 10 as president of SCAG. It's on the record. Look at SCAG's position. I was president and we voiced our concerns, but we took action. We met with the governor's office. We met with the person who sponsored the bill, Senator Scott Wiener. It's all public. And we took on SB 10, it was imposed unless amended. And we fought and we got some amendments in there to preserve some local control, particularly in cities like Long Beach. And so it's more than grandstanding. And I remember that vote. That vote was actually to ask the governor to veto it after it had been adopted by both houses. And the people that my opponent say that she talked to and wrote a letter to, they voted for it. Umberg voted for it. And so they already voted for it. It was passed in both houses. It was going to pass. And so, yes, I voted no on asking the governor to veto it. And I would do it again today because it was a ceremonial vote.
We have a rebuttal.
It was not to ask the governor to veto it.
Actually,
Let's let's do a fact check here. It wasn't to ask the governor to veto it. It was to ask the governor to not sign the bill. Good thing it's all recorded.
That's a veto.
So Councilman Richardson talks about his work on SCAG and how he made some comments in opposition to SB9 on SCAG. I'm not aware of that. That was never mentioned at any city council meeting ever. And I'm not aware of him meeting with the governor on behalf of the city of Long Beach. That's certainly not something that the council was aware of or voted to approve. But I can tell you, he served on the state legislative committee of the city council where we talk about state legislation, which would have been the perfect place to express any opposition to SB9 and how it's going to affect your own city. And nothing came out of SB at the state ledge committee to oppose SB9. So the fact that he may have done something that no one is aware of on another committee, but not in his own city, is interesting to say the least.
I wasn't going to use this chit, but this is a crowd that does check facts. And I want you to go listen to the remarks at the state legislative committee. When number one, I informed them of my work at SCAG and the positions that we took. I expressed my concerns on local control. All of those comments are on the record publicly in Long Beach on a committee. So it's available. I encourage you to take a look at it. Again, this is not about grandstanding about who was on the wrong side and who was on the right side. You need a mayor who's going to be straight with you and deliver results. I have a proven track record of results. I can, I've been trying to work on housing and homelessness for quite a long time. This is not new for me. And as mayor, I have the relationships with our city council, our college board, our education leaders to make sure that we have the partnerships in place to make a meaningful difference in people's lives and actually build housing that's affordable for people. Thank you.
We have a rebuttal.
Oh, yes, he definitely has those relationships. He spent a whole career building those relationships. Those are really important relationships. So important that he wouldn't vote against an item that was hurtful for the city to preserve those relationships. This is not an issue about housing or the need for housing in the city of Long Beach. We all agree that we need housing in the city of Long Beach. We all have compassion for those who need affordable housing in the city of Long Beach. SB9 was about local control. SB9 was about the city being able to weigh in and get input from communities regarding where that density was going to go. SB9 was about protecting the beautiful neighborhoods that everyone here has pride in and making sure that where we have additional density, it makes sense for our communities in terms of the impacts to those neighborhoods. SB9 was not about not wanting more housing. It was about local control.
Next question. In 2016, Measure A promised improved public safety, infrastructure, reopening of the community hospital, and a rainy day fund. In 6 years, Long Beach citizens are disappointed with the lack of progress in these areas. What would you do to provide these promised resources from Measure A? And Councilmember Richardson goes first.
Sure. We have delivered on a number of things that were outlined in Measure A. Some things that I wish were in Measure A were not, and we had to go back and add those things. For example, Paramedic Rescue 12, we told the story earlier. It wasn't included in the original plan, Restore. We had to go back and advocate and include that. But to put it in perspective, about 200 sworn positions were cut during the course of the pandemic, not the pandemic, our past recession in Long Beach. And Measure A began doing that fundamental work of restoring. We restored the training division. We couldn't conduct some of our own training in Long Beach, so we restored the PD training division. We restored the South Division for our Long Beach Police Department. We restored Engine 8, serving the Belmont Shore area. We restored Rescue 12. These made significant, meaningful differences. There's more that needs to happen. Measure A, the first tranche, has moved forward. Now we have a second tranche of funds, and we just proposed a new infrastructure plan, largely based on Measure A for the next 5 years. And so we have to make sure that we hold folks accountable and continue to deliver infrastructure and continue to invest in public safety through Measure A. But I will tell you, our costs are growing and our revenue sources like oil, that's declining. We're not gonna be able to count on that. There needs to be a big conversation about how we restructure, how we gather revenue, and how we boost revenue in other parts of town to make sure that we are growing our pie, if you will. Because the expectations of yesterday, this isn't Grandma's Long Beach anymore. There are services and things that are being realigned from the state to local government that cost more money. And we're gonna have to do more and innovate and change our city so we can deliver more services. And so I think Measure A has been significantly helpful in closing the gap. If we didn't have Measure A, we would be in a world of hurt right now. But we need to be honest about expectations that there are a lot of things that we need to do internally and as a city to make sure we have a modern city that can continue to deliver results. And it may look differently than what we have today. Thank you.
Well, if you're a grandma, this is still your Long Beach, so you can embrace it. Measure A, a lot of people don't know this, but Measure A actually has an oversight committee. And everything that we slate for Measure A funding has to go through this committee. And it's a citizen oversight committee. And they have to make sure that every dollar that we spend on Measure A fits within what we committed as a resolution of the city council the money would go to. The primary focus of Measure A over the last few years, well, since its passage, has been on public safety and infrastructure. I know there are still a lot of streets and alleys and sidewalks that people want fixed. But when I first joined the city council in 2014, I had the privilege to let one community association out of 21 know that they were getting a street paved. That has changed tremendously as a result of Measure A. We are able to pave thousands of square miles of streets as a result of Measure A. And it has really helped us improve our infrastructure, although it's not where it needs to be, and we are working on that. But I will say we've also added police officers every year. Now, last year or during COVID, we did not. Every department had to suffer cuts, including the police department. But every other year, we used Measure A funds to add more police officers. It's just that we never saw a net gain. Because as we were onboarding new officers, we were having officers retire, and we just never saw a net gain, which is why things like retention bonuses really work, because the public never really saw that net gain. But I can tell you, community hospital is a whole other story, because it didn't work out because of the risk the city took with the partner. But the $22 million that we were going to use from Measure A to go into community hospital is now available for us to use for infrastructure and public safety. So that's a good thing. We didn't, of course, have that come to fruition, but every other thing that we committed to residents we would use Measure A funding for, we have.
Economic development and business associations are vital to a thriving city. What will you do to promote business opportunities in Long Beach that will build our economy and provide jobs for our area? And we're going to start with Councilwoman Price.
Thank you. As I mentioned earlier, Mark and I own a business. We started it 3 years ago. We went through COVID. We did everything we could to survive. We got PPP loan. We went through our savings. We did everything we could to try to keep our business alive. And I'm proud to say we had 15 employees. We went down to 2. Now we're at about 11. And I can tell you that the city, again, I've mentioned it before, we don't spend any money in business recruitment and retention. Think about the breakfast bar. I don't know how many of you guys have eaten there before. They have a downtown location. They just opened a second location at 4th and Redondo. The city should be actively going to businesses, mom and pop businesses like the ones that Mark and I own, and asking them if they want to open up a second branch here in the city of Long Beach. Asking us if we want to train up our employees so that our employees can become entrepreneurs someday and they can get out of this job that they have that's an hourly job. The city is not doing anything proactive like that. Now, we did take advantage of the services provided right out of Long Beach City College that help new businesses get established, but that's not really a program that the city fosters or sponsors in the way that it should or it could. Look, at the end of the day, nobody is going to want to invest in this city if they don't feel that the return on their investment is going to make sense. It doesn't matter what words we use, what we try to offer them in terms of what they can expect to see in the city of Long Beach. If they drive to an area that looks blighted, they're not going to invest in that area. They're not going to invest their life savings into a city that they don't think is willing to invest in them. As a small business owner, I can tell you that the most important thing is to know that you can get through the system, the permitting system quickly with the lowest costs that you can have to pay, and that the city is going to support you so that you can continue to grow and thrive. And we could do a much better job of that as a city. It's just not been a priority for us because our staff is stretched so thin in our economic development department. They handle all city assets and leases. They're just stretched way too thin to give that priority.
So it's always been a priority for me. When I assumed office, we didn't have a whole lot going on. We had a lot to do in terms of cleaning up our community and making sure that we made the investments necessary, show that if we invest in ourselves, others will invest in us too. I remember the very first things that we did was meet with the planning director at the time, Amy Bodek, and said, hey, look at the areas of town that are thriving. It was Bixby Knolls, it was Pine Avenue, it was 4th Street. They all had a business improvement district in common. We said, we want a business improvement district. And the response at the time, and I think Amy was doing the right thing in telling us, this is a big undertaking. She says, I don't know if the business is ready. It's going to take you 10 years. Well, we said, okay, well, today is day 1 and tomorrow's day 2. And we got it done in 2 years. We got that business district established to add extra sort of work. Then add extra services corridor. Then we said, we need, you've got chop shops next to car dealerships, next to a fourplex, next to a school. We need a better plan for our corridors because it's hard to attract development. No one wants to come here. And said, okay, well, you need a specific plan. So we said, okay, well, let's do a specific plan. How long does that take? Guess what the answer was? 10 years. Well, today is day 1 and tomorrow's day 2. And we went and we reached out to regional partners like SCAG and all these other things. And now we have UpPlan, the Uptown Planning, Land Use, and Neighborhood Strategy that sets new standards for Atlantic Avenue, Artesia Boulevard. Second phase comes this fall, which is for the rest of the North Long Beach area. I think that's important because we can see the results. Just last night at City Council, we approved 84 town. I'm gonna continue that because this is a good story. We don't have the luxury to say that people won't come if your situation is bad. You have to do both. And it's an economic imperative that all parts of our town are able to thrive. I can show you where Paramount Petroleum used to exist, a 75-year-old polluter, a refinery in North Long Beach. You go there today, a modern industrial facility with 600 jobs. All of them started at $24 and above with Matheson's Flight Extenders, which is a USPS postal service. We attracted, I believe the number now is 14 new restaurants since the beginning of the pandemic. 2 of them didn't make it. I understand that it was been a difficult time. But do you know how many restaurants we opened prior to then in the last decade? Very, very few. Sal's Gumbo Shack that started in the 9th District now has a second location in Bixby Knolls. How do we do all of these things? It's called boutique economic development. And the council office was very engaged in it. But it doesn't need to be the council office's job. It's the city's job to make sure that every part of town has attention, has jobs, has investment in every part of their town. And so what I will tell you is I have an economic recovery plan, economic development plan. It focuses on boutique economic development. It's posted on my website. It talks about establishing a new role called the Grow Long Beach Advisory Team that focuses on coming up with boutique strategies to make sure every part of our city is economically thriving. I have a proven track record of getting it done in the most difficult area of town. And I plan to make sure that every part of our city is economically thriving from an economic standpoint. Thank you.
We have a rebuttal.
So I completely agree with Councilman Richardson that we need to do everything we can to help every business corridor in this city thrive. And that's going to take a lot of work because they're not all starting from the same place. And we're going to have to go in and figure out what are the needs of that particular corridor, what are some of the biggest challenges there. And you have to do that as a first step before you can start to recruit businesses to those areas. But I absolutely agree with him that it shouldn't be the responsibility of the council office to do that. It should be the responsibility of city management to focus on that and have an arm with private partners that focuses on that. I represent 3 business improvement districts in my district as a council member. And I can tell you when there's vacancies there, I have a business liaison on my team. I'm the only council office that I know of that has that. But we can't together alone fill those vacancies. The city really has to step up and help and provide partnerships with private sector who understand how to get business done to help us in that effort.
This will be our final question and then we'll have wrap up.
Okay, next question. What can be done to improve our parks in the city and or create more green space where is most needed? And Councilmember Richardson.
Okay, thank you. So I will start with, we have a real problem with inequity in our parks in our city, and it's gone back generations. And, I sincerely feel that every council member loves parks. No council member is gonna say, I want fewer parks in my community. But there are challenges. And so when I took office, one of the very first things that I did was partner with our health department and our parks department and a grant from Kaiser Permanente on an initiative called the Heal Zone. And one of the outcomes of the Heal Zone was establishing an uptown open space plan, which took the challenge of, you've got about a tenth of the open space as some other council districts do, but you have the term we're built out. How do you solve that problem? And so this plan, which went on to win American Planning Association awards, identified opportunities at the LA River, opportunities with Edison rights of way, how to build small parks, pocket parks. One project is called the Green Belt, the Hamilton Loop, right, which takes embankments along the 91 freeway and repurposes that space to create open space. I'm proud of the results. We were able to get some projects again, these are projects that had started, but they had gaps in funding and figure it out. Like the Houghton Park Community Center, there was an idea, there was $1 million dedicated to it, but we had to find the other $9 million to make it happen. The DeForest Park wetlands, there's 40 acres of open space where people used to go. You would see drug activity and those things. Today, you see there's turtles and there's ducks. We took our holiday photos there last year. Right now, under construction, and we open up in the next couple of weeks at DeForest Park is an environmental conservation center. It's a building that was paid for, a community center in our city that was paid for by Rivers and Mountains Conservancy. I know what it takes to work with agencies like Rivers and Mountains Conservancy and planning agencies to deliver results. If you come to our parks, Houghton Park has a new community center. We have a new health equity center at the park, which was a former child care center. We have new space, a visioning plan for our whole district, a visioning plan for the Forest Park, a pool in the works at Ramona Park, a playground fully funded at Ramona Park, a vision for a loop that's partially funded. So we know how to make it happen. As mayor, this is something I like. I'll just use, it's fine. I got a few more in this last one. As mayor, I know what it takes to bring people together, because this is in fact a unifying issue, how we expand more open space. When you think about it from an environmental standpoint, everyone cares about this. When you improve access to open space and you clean the air, it shortens that 17-year difference in life expectancy. It makes it cheaper on the system when people are looking at things like healthcare costs. And so these are things that we need to do. In North Long Beach, I have a proven track record of doing it. I can show my results. Hang on.
You still have time. You still have
okay,
time.
I'm just gonna prepay. I have a proven track record of delivering those results. We need to do more along the LA River. I fully acknowledge the work of the River Park Coalition and others. I know that our sort of first district, Cesar Park, Drake Chavez stuff, when I was doing outreach with some of the young folks in Washington neighborhood, they were like, hey, we have a park, the 14th Street Greenbelt, but we don't have a community center. So I think we need a community center at Seaside Park. But there's work that we can do as council members to make a difference. And I think this is a unifying issue. Our budget needs to reflect that need. We need to make sure as we apply for grants, the majority of those grants go to addressing some of those challenges, because it's going to take a lot of money to make things happen. I also think every part of town, has an issue when your grass, like my kids play soccer over at, Hartwell? And we look at the grass in all of our parks, and it all needs to be improved. El Dorado Park, all these parks, the grass needs to be improved. That's something that brings us all together. So as mayor, I'm going to prioritize parks and recreations every part of our town, no matter where you're from. But I also acknowledge the challenges with this systemic issue that we've had for decades in Long Beach, and I'm going to commit to making a difference there. Thank you.
I'm just going to cash them all in then, because why not? I thought they were only for rebuttal like the rules suggested, but I'm just going to cash them all in anyway. So I'll get a little bit of extra time. So the question was what we're doing about parks and what we're doing about open space. So let me start with parks. We are building some beautiful parks in the city of Long Beach. We have beautiful playgrounds. We have amazing new open spaces that we're creating, but we have not funded maintenance of those parks sufficiently. We just had our strategic planning efforts that are with the Parks Department come before the council not too long ago. And we talked about the fact that we don't have money in our budget to fully maintain these parks in the manner that they should be maintained. That's a concern, and we need to reevaluate our priorities and perhaps stop building new parks until we can get the budget in the place where we can take care of our existing parks. Because our existing parks, if they become neglected, they're not going to be attractive places for people to want to go and spend time. The other issue that we have right now with parks is we're having to close a lot of our park bathrooms because of issues of homelessness. And that is a shame. If we're going to build a brand new park and we're going to put in brand new equipment for playgrounds and for kids to play, and yet a parent can't go there with a child for an hour and not be able to use the restroom, then we're really rendering a lot of those spaces unusable by the taxpayers. And we need to think about that in terms of parks. But we do need more parks and we need more open space. And so I'll tell you that as chair of the Los Cerritos Wetlands Authority, which is a joint powers authority, there's multiple cities and agencies on it. We work together to come up with a restoration plan for the wetlands. The wetlands, as you guys know, borders East Long Beach and Seal Beach. And right now we have an in and out on top of the wetlands. And the reason there's an in and out on top of the wetlands is because when C-DIP was passed in the 70s, it didn't preserve that land from having buildings put onto it. And so there was always this exception that allowed for additional buildings to go up on the wetlands because that area was not preserved. We passed the Southeast Area Specific Plan, which is called C-SIP, sounds a lot like C-DIP, but we tried one to be very different. And C-SIP prevents any building on the wetlands in perpetuity. It allows for restoration of the wetlands through partnership with private entities to be able to make it more like a Bolsa Chica. We also restored Colorado Lagoon and made it the first and only coastal mitigation bank in the state of California. We're going to be opening that, connecting it to Alamitos Bay so that it has good water quality forever. But the way that we're going to preserve open space outside of these two areas that were in my district that I was involved in is through our zoning and looking at our zoning in a way that preserves spaces so that they can't be built upon, so that you can't have commercial properties or buildings go onto those spaces. And you have to do that through zoning. When we did the land use element, we worked very hard in my district, and every council member, I'm sure, worked very hard with their own communities, I hope, to identify areas that should be preserved as open space and to zone them in such a way that it would not make it profitable for a developer to come in and build on that site. We certainly did that in East Long Beach. We had areas that could be developed into housing, but we zoned them as recreation, which people did not like, the people that owned the property did not like, but they were adjacent to wetlands that were sensitive habitat. And we didn't believe that a housing site or a commercial site next to the wetlands was a conducive use. And so we had to make some modifications to the zoning to allow for eternal preservation of those spaces as open space so that they can't be built upon. That's what we need to do. And that kind of communication has to happen step by step by talking with the community and making sure that they're part of the specific plans while those specific plans are being developed, not on the night of council, not within hours of a council meeting, but early on, because there are areas that we can identify that really should not be used for development or density, that should be preserved as open space. And the only way they'll be preserved as open space is if it is zoned that way as recreation or passive use. And there are many areas in the city where I think there's opportunities to do that. And as mayor, I would commit to working with the council members to help them identify those areas and supporting them and supporting their communities in making that a reality. I think my role as mayor would be to help guide the council members in whatever they need to be successful. And if that means identifying open space for their communities, I would support that because the needs of the residents are going to always outweigh the needs of the developers.
Hey, Councilmember Richardson does have a rebuttal.
I got one more. So I agree with much of what Councilwoman Price said. The one thing that I will say is that the statement that we should perhaps stop building new parks. I fundamentally think that's a problem. There's a sense that There's never a right time to invest in communities that lack investment. There's always an excuse. We have to. That's our job. And we've shown how to do it. When we saw we had a budget issue on the budget, the after-school program at DeForest Park needed to close down. That staff shifted to Houghton Park. That building shut down. What did we do? We partnered with Campfire USA. They now are building a camping facility there. They're doing an after-school program. We brought in Conservation Corps. They're building a brand new community center and have a vision for the park. Guess what? Much of that was funded by outside partners who are delivering more services today than we were before. If there is a will, there's a way. It is not acceptable to tell the great majority of our city that maybe right now is not the time to continue to build parks. We need to continue to build parks, and we need to think about how we partner to make sure those parks are maintained and programmed. Thank you.
We'll now go into closing statements. Each candidate has 3 minutes. There's no opportunity to rebut or to add time.
Thank you. I'm going to start with my closing statement to make it very clear. I love parks. We should build more and more parks, but we should never build an asset that we can't maintain. I think that's just giving residents false hope. And that was the point of that. So I just want to make sure sometimes in political silly season, people take your quotes and misinterpret them. So I want to make sure I was clear on that. Thank you for the opportunity that you've given us tonight to get to talk to you. It's truly my pleasure and my honor to be here to get to meet all of you. I just want to express to you that this is a very important election. And I am very proud of the work that I've done in the 3rd district, but also in the work that I've done citywide. I'm proud of the environmental improvements that we've made in the 3rd district with the Colorado Lagoon, with water quality, with our wetlands restoration. It's been huge and life-changing for so many. I'm proud of the work that we've done in economic development, bringing on new businesses that have added to the sales tax revenue of this city, creating centers and shopping experiences and businesses that are at the 2nd and PCH shopping center, making sure that our vacancy rate in the Belmont Shore corridor stayed as low as it did through the entire pandemic and up until today. That took a lot of work and it was not an easy thing to do, but we worked together and we made that happen. I'm proud of the work that I've done citywide to introduce homeless transitional housing in the 3rd district. Again, something that was not immediately welcomed by everyone, but we worked together as a community to ensure that we were getting people off the streets, but we were also ensuring that quality of life for residents were not impacted. We're going to continue to have that same approach as the community hospital site transitions into a wellness campus where we're going to be offering mental health and substance abuse treatment. We're going to work with the community to ensure that quality of life impacts are minimal. I've done amazing work, I think, in the area of police reform and in the area of police transparency and accountability. I think that's been a huge area that has impacted the city greatly. We now have body-worn cameras for every police officer in the city of Long Beach. That has reduced the number of lawsuits the city gets, and it has also provided another measure of accountability for those who come into contact with the police who have proof of what happened in that situation to help protect them. We've included training for our police officers to go to Georgetown Law School and participate in the bystandership liability through the ABLE program to get more transparency and accountability. I'm grateful for the opportunity to serve my city. I am leaving a career that I love to serve a city I love with no political aspirations beyond that. I believe in fighting for the people of this city and making sure that every resident in this city feels heard and feels that they have an opportunity to thrive in this city. I think it's really important for you to know that there's a difference, a big difference between me and Councilman Richardson. Councilman Richardson has spent his life in politics, and I've spent my life in public service. And I'm here to serve you, and I ask for your vote. Thank you.
Well, first of all, thanks so much to everybody for coming out. I know this is an incredibly important election for everyone, and elections can be scary. But I have hope, and I'll tell you why I have hope. I have hope for my children, and it's bedtime, and we can't wait to take them home and put them in the bed, and they've been troopers throughout this whole time. I'll tell you, coming to the city, becoming a city employee, I don't know if that's called politics, but becoming a city employee when I was 26 was one of the best opportunities of my lifetime. I bought a house in this city when I was 25. You know, this is the city that allowed me to come here as a young man right out of college. I was student body president at Cal State Dominguez Hills. Get an apartment in Bixby Knolls. for a 1-bedroom apartment for $900 a month, marry my wife at the Long Beach Museum of Art, have my 2 daughters at Long Beach Memorial, have a job as a chief of staff, like working on parks and learning policy at 26 at City Hall, becoming a council member, an honor of my lifetime, to work hard and advocate for a community with families just like mine who want an opportunity to serve as vice mayor of this city. You know, I never imagined that this was in the cards for me, but that's what's possible in the city of Long Beach. Now I'll tell you, I'm optimistic about the future because I've seen what we've been able to do when we work together. I've worked hard to go from 5 neighborhood associations to 13 in the 9th district. Do things like participatory budgeting. People said you were crazy, but we had our community help show us how to spend $300,000 2 times on a needs assessment, improving our parks and making a real difference. I'm proud to try to take a smart data-driven approach to addressing the Tele2 cities and inequity in our city by establishing the Office of Equity and leading in a very difficult time on the Racial Equity and Reconciliation Initiative in our city. I'm a proven leader that knows how to work together and bring people together to address our city's biggest challenges. When homelessness was at our doorstep, we understood the assignment. We had been dealing with homelessness for quite a long time. We worked together, built the coalitions, the partnerships with the county to deliver the city's first municipal homeless shelter. That's inspired our whole city. Instead of not in my backyard, every community saying we'll do our part. That's the leadership that we need in our city, one that can bring us all together. That's how we unified our city in the primary and won 7 out of 9 council districts. That's how we unified our coalition across town. 4 out of 5 school board members endorsed my campaign for mayor, the majority of the city council college board. And I'm proud that Mayor Garcia, after a long time, it was a long time, he finally came on board and said, I'm voting for Rex Richardson for mayor because I know that he has what it takes. He's worked with us. He's worked with us both and understand what it takes to actually deliver results on our biggest challenges. Now, campaigns are difficult and tough, but I know that we'll make it through it. I know because I saw what we did after the unrest, whipping up glass and painting out graffiti, North Long Beach stepping up and fighting for libraries and parks. Across our city, we will overcome our greatest challenges, but if we work together. I'm Vice Mayor Rex Richardson. Thank you so much, and I ask for your vote. Take care.
On behalf of Lakewood Village Neighborhood Association, I want to thank all of you for showing up tonight. What a wonderful crowd. We will be going to Council District 5 next, and that will be happening in about 5 minutes. But thank you so much. And thank you to our candidates. We really appreciate your time.